Hello and welcome to another episode of Historically Speaking. Today I'm joined by a very senior guest and author and a highly acclaimed author, political commentator, senior journalist, Sanjay Baru. He has authored very interesting books which have gone on to become highly talked about, including 1991 on Narsimha Rao, and The Accidental Prime Minister, which was also made into a movie and one of the most popular books of its time and continues to be relevant. And Then there is his latest book, India's Power Elite, where he talks about issues which are central to Indian democracy and Indian society. Thank you, Mr. Baru, for coming to our podcast and taking our time. Fundamental and first question that I want to raise with you is with your latest book. You talk about, it's called India's Power Elite. So I want to ask you, is the power elite connected to a particular class or caste? And how far have we evolved since 1947? Although we are very clear that the Constituent Assembly also had just elites of different kinds, landed elite, different sort of elites, English-speaking elite. And there was an elite consensus, which is also called a Nehruvian consensus sort of a thing. So, what do you think in your understanding?
Well, it has changed. I mean, that's the whole point of writing this book was to understand the change. I think the best description we have of what we call the Nehruvian era of the nature of the elite was Ramanor Lohiya's description. That's upper caste, English speaking, and property. That is inherited property.
Yes.
These are three characteristics of the elite that Lohiya spoke about. And I argue that all three have changed. That today the business community is not only about inherited elite. I mean, the big ones like, say, Ambani, the inherited property or inherited wealth. But a large number of people are there today who are millionaires and even billionaires whose wealth is not inherited. Second, the rise of the OBCs, the middle caste, in politics since the 80s has changed the nature of the caste composition of the elite. I mean, it's no longer just the Brahmins and the Kayasthas and the Reddis and Kammas and Jats, but a lot of middle castes who have come to very powerful positions. And third, English speaking is no longer important. I mean, in large parts of the country, vernacular has become important. You go to Tamil Nadu, it's Tamil, in Bengal, it's Bengali, in Gujarat, it's Gujarati. And so the local language has become quite important, even in business. I mean, I used to be editor of the Business Standard newspaper, and we had a Gujarati edition of Business Standard because Gujarat was one state where you had investors who could not read English. Normally, investor community in the country would be English reading. They would read Economic Times, Business Standard in the English. But Gujarat had a investing class, which was only in the, could read only Gujarati. So we had a Gujarati newspaper. So all the three characteristics of the elite that Lohiya talked about of the Nehruvian era are no longer relevant. And in a sense, that's the change that I look at. Of course, there are changes in other institutions. For example, the bureaucracy. In the 50s, 60s, before independence, the Indian civil service, typically it was the upper caste who went into the civil services, right? That began to change, as particularly in southern India. I mean, even today in the north, a large number of those who go in for civil service exams come from the upper caste. But you go to South India or Western India, the upper castes are into business, into finance, into engineering, into medicine, and it's the middle caste that are getting into IAS, IFS. So there's a change in the class and caste composition of even the administration. And then look at Parliament itself, the membership of Parliament. In the 50s, 60s, a dominant share of parliamentary seats went to landowners, peasants. That has changed. Now we have more and more people with an urban background coming into Parliament. So all these institutions of power, the class and caste character of these institutions has changed, and that's what I try to record.
But in many ways, Indian society is still very, very feudal in many respects, or how it thinks. How do you think has the composition of those in power changed with the rise of the Bharatiya Janata Party, whether it's representative bodies or whether it's media or whether it's bureaucracy? Has it got to do with the Bharatiya Janata Party and Mayawati and Kashiram caste revolution during the 60s, 70s, then Mulayam Singh Yadav, Lalu Prasad Yadav, or is it and the BJP's OBC push, or that? How has it dramatically changed in that sense?
As well as in many cultural terms, we are a very feudal society.
Yeah.
Having said that, I think the transition that we have seen in the last decade or so, particularly in the last decade, not so much during Atalji's time, but in the last decade, is that you have both a rise of Hindutva consciousness, which
Yes.
is essentially communal in nature, but at the same time, a growing assertion of the middle castes within that, which is Modi's contribution, right? I mean, as I write in my book, if you look at Vajpayee's regime,
Yes, you mentioned
so
it.
you have Arun Jaitley, Sushma Swaraj, Prakash Javadekar, Suresh Prabhu, so many Brahmins
Yes.
around Atalji.
Yes.
You look at Narendra Modi, I mean, the only Brahmins are the non-political ones, Jaishankar and Nirmala.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
All the politically powerful people are from middle caste or from landowning caste. So I think what Modi has tried to do is to craft an interesting alliance of the middle caste with Hindutva. While till Atal Bihari Vajpayee, the BJP was essentially called a Brahmin Banya party.
Yes, it was.
Which it no longer is.
Yes, yes. So, with the changing profile of institutions and other things, whether it's parliament, media, bureaucracy, which you have talked about extensively, you've also talked about the changing profiles of elite institutions. My first question, there are two parts of this question. First, I would like to ask you, why do you call IIC, golf club, gymkhana club elite institutions? And if they have changed, if their profile has changed, how is it truly representative of the entire picture?
See, first of all, given the structure of our society, the elite is a very thin layer. It's not more than the top 5%
Yes.
of the 1.4 billion Indians, right? So when you look at an organization, whether it's the India International Center in Delhi or any clubs across the country,
Yes.
membership is elitist. There's no question of anyone from the other 95% even joining them. So therefore, by definition, these are elite institutions.
Yes.
Because they attract membership from the top 5%
Yes.
of the population. Their elitist nature has changed in the sense that the membership to the IIC, for example, of which I am a member, was essentially through what you could call old boy network. I know you, come and join, I know somebody who invites me. There was a certain networking, which was because the elite was very small. So within that small elite, this networking was on a more or less, my own membership to the IIC was over a telephone call. The person who was at that time on the membership committee, Pai Panandikar, who was director of the Center for Policy, called me and said, come and become a member. And I became a member, right?
Yes.
That was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Today, they have a very systematic committee, they have application process, screening process, interview, etc., etc., etc. So the whole nature of even membership has changed, in these institutions. And if you go and, into any of these clubs, Gymkhana Club, whatever, English is no longer the dominant language.
Yes.
That itself tells you the change in the nature of the elite. 20 years back, you walked into any of these clubs, you only heard English. Today, you'll hear Hindi here, you'll hear Telugu in Hyderabad, in a Secunderabad club, if you go, people speak in the local language, right? So, that is a change I draw attention to.
You would find it interesting to know that I also went through the entire procedure. I gave an application form which had a resume. I was called for the interview, and that's how I got the temporary membership of IIC. And it'll take me years to get a permanent membership. So I also had to go through the rigors of it because I needed it for the library purposes. So yes, you're right about it, that now they've become more in terms of who they are. you have to have certain amount of credentials. That's what they say in a
It's
resume.
no longer the old boy network.
No. It was not. I had to be recommended by another professor from another institution to support my academic profile, and only then and they said in the form that you have to make meaningful contribution towards the IIC and in terms of
I know.
so they have become certainly much more rigorous in choosing. So I'll again take you back to the elite topic because I'm not done. There are regional elites who sometimes you can call satraps. In politics, we call them regional satraps, as you may know. And then there are national elites also who have both of these elite systems were a part of the Congress system at one point of time.
Yes.
And you talk about it in your book that they have shifted from the Congress towards regional party or to any other party, and that has led to the eroding of the base of the Congress party. So, why have they shifted from the Congress?
I think one reason was the excessive centralization of the power system within the Congress. When I give examples, just to give you one anecdote, when a particular businessman in Andhra Pradesh, whom I know, was applying for a license for a particular factory in the old days, before 91, license permit control Raj, he was competing against a Birla, who had access to people in Delhi. And this guy, I know, I knew him, he is no longer alive, had no access to anybody in Delhi.
Yes.
And therefore, he had to lobby with the local politicians. And the power of those local politicians within the Congress system began to decline as the central leadership became more and more powerful. When I remember one incident where Channa Reddy was chief minister of Andhra Pradesh, and in Andhra Pradesh he was a very powerful chief minister. But he would get instructions from the Prime Minister, Indira Gandhi, sent to him through Dhawan, who was a PA. So that was the kind of system where the Prime Minister would not talk directly to a chief minister, but ask the PA, give instructions. These are examples I know from personal knowledge, which I mention here and there. So I think this excessive centralization of power in Delhi during Indira Gandhi and Rajiv Gandhi's time created a certain power vacuum at the state level. So that, interestingly, in Nehru's time, the chief ministers were extremely powerful people. Even though Jawaharlal Nehru was a very powerful prime minister and nationwide respect, but you had people like Brahmanand Reddy, Sanjeev Reddy in Andhra Pradesh, you had Annadurai in Tamil Nadu, you had EMS Namboodiripad in Kerala, you have YB Chavan in Maharashtra, GB Pant and Atulya Ghosh. So you have powerful chief ministers. Those powerful chief ministers got decimated. Which is why, again, I keep giving examples from my state of Andhra Pradesh. N.T. Ramarao came up. And what was N.T. Ramarao's whole platform? He was saying that these chief ministers have become rubber stamp. That they have to go to Delhi to get permission to sign a file. And that is how regional leaders came up. That is how regional parties came up. Whether it was Ramakrishna Hegde in Karnataka, NTR in Andhra Pradesh, the Patnayaks in Orissa, or Mamta in Bengal, all the regional leaders, or even before that, Jyoti Basu, who incidentally I see more as a regional leader than as a communist leader. Just as EMS was very much a regional leader. I mean, his personality was of a Malayali leader, right? So I think the regional leaders began to assert themselves when within the Congress system, the regional leadership of the Congress became weaker and weaker vis-a-vis the national leadership.
Do you see any change in the Congress with vis-a-vis regional and national leaders? Although the Congress is not in power at the center, but what has its dealing been? They are in power in few states. So.
Well, I think now the political system, both the national parties, BJP and Congress, the central leadership has become far more important. For a variety of reasons, apart from financial mobilization that happens at the central level, the nature of the media, electronic media, all this imaging propaganda, etc. So I think in BJP and in the Congress, you see that this national leadership has become more important. I mean, in BJP, for example, Nobody knows who chief ministers of Rajasthan or Madhya Pradesh. These are non-entities have become chief ministers. This is the Indira Gandhi system that Narendra Modi has brought in.
But then you have a Yogi Adityanath and you had a Shivraj Singh Chauhan.
Yeah, Shivraj
Yes.
Singh was no longer there.
Yeah, but when
And
he
Yogi
was,
is
he
the
was a very
exception.
powerful chief minister.
Yeah, but Yogi ji is an exception to the rule. The rule is now weaker and weaker. I mean, Orissa. Kaun kiska becomes a chief minister? So it's the same Indira Gandhi system, excessive centralization. This will have its impact.
Coming to the question of, since you have written many books, and since I also write, and you've written books which have been newsmakers, so I want to ask you, what do you leave out while writing the book? Is it whether it was 1991 or Accidental PM or this one, or the any books that you've written? Do you leave them out by choice, by design, or is it by constraints of space, or do you think it's for another time?
Well, it depends on the book. I mean, for example, in the Accidental Prime Minister, as I made it very clear, I've said that I will not include whatever whatever, first of all, contravenes the Official Secrets Act,
Yes, of
because
course.
that would be illegal.
Yes.
But apart from that, I said, whatever somebody has said to me saying, keep this to yourself, that is not included.
Yes.
What is there are statements and conversations where nobody has asked me to keep it a secret, right? So that is what is included in the book. But there are many things that I am privy to where people have said, or the Prime Minister or others have said, that, please don't tell anybody. And those I have not included in the book. So in that sense, I've kept that trust. But in the case of 1991, the focus was essentially on that 1 year. And I look at the economic transition, the political transition with the assassination of Rajiv Gandhi, and the geopolitical transition with the collapse of the Soviet Union. Three things. Now, what have I kept out of it is the whole communal politics that by 92 results in the destruction of the Babri Masjid, right?
Yes.
And what was happening. So the politics of the second year of Narsimha Rao doesn't enter the book, because my book ends in December 91.
Yes.
But that's because of the way I define. In fact, each chapter is a month of the year, right?
Yes.
And for power elite, I mean, I think if you look at some of the reviews that have appeared, a lot of people have said that in many areas have not gone into greater depth. That would have required a bigger book. And frankly, most of the power elite I wrote during the COVID lockdown period with just access to the internet. I couldn't even go to a library. So, for example, the chapter on the changes in the leadership of the military or leadership of the civil services, I have not gone into any great depth. So that's the limitation of the book. But as I said, part of the limitation is because of the period, because of COVID and lack of access to library. But these days, it's very interesting that you asked this question. These days, publishers do not want big books. Most publishers would be quite happy if you wrote a book about 75 to 80,000 words. And that's to do with the economics of publishing, the cost of paper, cost of everything. So, in fact, there's one book I wrote on 75 years of the Indian economy, which was part of a series, the 75th year series, where the publisher said to me, we don't want more than 40,000 words.
Oh, God. And how do you write that?
Yeah, exactly. So 40,000 words, 75 years of the Indian economy.
On Indian economy. How do you write that? Oh, my God.
But that's the constraint imposed by the publisher. What do you do?
So since we have discussed a bit of 1991, since Narsimha Rao happens to be a prime minister who I admire a great deal and who I would come in my list of one of my favorite prime ministers because I admire the grit of the person, do you think he has been restored to his place in the Congress system?
No.
Still not yet. And why so?
No, it's the restoration.
He is one of the because you say in your book 1991, he is the book how he transformed India with 1991 and liberalization. So why deny the transformational aspect, if not the political, but transformational aspect and the enormity of what Manmohan Singh and Narsimha Rao did collectively.
See, why they didn't do this, I have no answer to that. It astounds me, for example, that Prime Minister Manmohan Singh was in office for 10 years
Yes,
and did not give him Bharat Ratna.
yes,
And it took even Narendra Modi 10 years to give him Bharat Ratna,
yes,
at the end of his second term.
yes,
Uh, I mean, you gave Bharat Ratna to M.G. Ramachandran
yes,
and not to P.V. Narsimha Rao. So it's a certain kind of cussedness. Because here was a man who had his own mind on many issues and did not toe the line of the Darbar, the Delhi Darbar. And
which was a task.
which is a task and which I've written about.
Yes,
But also, I think more than that, the whole issue of his handling of Babri Masjid.
yes,
The party, in my view, took a wrong view of that whole handling and tried to somehow shirk its responsibility by putting the blame on him.
yes,
While the fact is that the entire cabinet authorized the Prime Minister to take a final call.
yes,
And in the cabinet, you had Arjun Singh, you had N.D. Tiwari, you had all these characters who later on attacked him. They were all sitting inside the cabinet, right? So I think they wanted someone to hang this problem on, and they hung it on Narsimha Rao. They discredited him, and he did not have a political base at home. That's his weakness. Being a Brahmin from Telangana, by the time in the 90s, Brahmins were no longer relevant in South Indian politics. Only in UP they still have a presence, right?
yes,
So he had no local political base, and bereft of that local base, he could be treated cursorily. I think the tragedy is that the party tried to give the entire credit for 91. One to Rajiv Gandhi and the other to Manmohan Singh, leaving this man out. You read some of the books written, Jairam Ramesh's book on 91, there's some other books on that. You either credit the predecessor or the successor, but not the man who there.
yes,
Very, very sad and very petty. And they paid a price for it. They paid a price because for a long time in Telangana, with BRS coming to power, for 10 years they were out of office. And now they've come back to power, but now caste has taken over the politics of both Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. It's become Reddy and Kamma, and
So I have this interesting theory, which is my own theory, which is Congress, until and unless it restores Narsimha Rao and Manmohan Singh also to its glory, I don't think so they'll be able to come back to a power, because you need to own up your leaders.
Absolutely.
Good or bad, you need to own up your leaders. And I don't think so the entire Narsimha Rao was operating in a context, even with the demolition, he is operating in a context. To put it entirely on to him is disregarding what all he has achieved apart from that.
Absolutely.
And I see that a lot with Manmohan Singh also, because there's a lot of disregard for what Manmohan Singh also did, which he achieved a lot. They
Sure.
got 200 seats in his
209.
tenure in
209.
Yeah, so that was his performance and
Exactly,
not
or
otherwise.
206. Yeah.
A follow-up question is, there's a famous quote of Rao, and it is there in the Prime Minister's Museum, which was erstwhile Nehru Memorial Museum and Library, because I've been a frequent visitor there, so I've seen it. Rao's famous quote was, indecision is also a decision. So it is a conundrum, because some people say he was not decisive when it was important to be decisive. Yet you have something as big as 1991, where prior to him, Chandrasekhar was not ready to take that step. Nobody else was thinking. Here was Manmohan Singh, and of course, Manmohan Singh being the main person and Rao being the executioner for this idea, still carried on. So why does this indecisive sort of negative connotation still stick with Prime Minister Narsimha Rao?
I think that's a misreading of his tenure, frankly. Like, for example, the perception that Manmohan Singh never spoke.
Yeah.
That was only in the last year or so that he stopped speaking, because the situation had become so bad that after 2013, his public appearances declined. But even in his first term, you know, when I was there in the PMO, Manmohan Singh addressed a press conference in every single state capital, including Port Blair. So not just in Delhi, but whenever he moved out of Delhi, wherever he went, I would arrange a press conference with the local media across the country, right? So he was very willing to speak and express his opinion, answer questions, but this image has stuck. Now, in the case of Narsimha Rao, this image of being indecisive is stuck. But if you actually look at the track record, and you have Vinay Sitapathi's biography of him, and you have my book on 91, but beyond 91, look at the kind of decisions he took, whether on recognizing Israel or working with China or with the United States, or on the employment guarantee program which started in his time, or on school education initiatives. There's large number of things which he did. But coming back to the statement itself, first of all, it's factually correct that when you do not take a decision, then you are willing to live with the consequences of not taking the decision, which is a decision.
Yes.
Right? So, I mean, he's a clever guy. I mean,
of course.
Narsimha Rao. So, he coined the phrase which
is the most captivating phase, by the way, in that museum. I got stuck on it. I was like, wow.
But it's a decision. So when you, for example, decide to not intervene on the Babri Masjid, that was not indecision.
Yes.
People said, oh, he was sleeping, he was ignoring. No, he was not sleeping, he was not ignoring. He took a decision that sometime or the other this will happen. Let us see the consequences, right? But on 91, on your question about the reforms, I think Chandrasekhar was willing to bite the bullet. And I mentioned that in my book. He sent Yashwant Sinha to the IMF to negotiate the terms for a loan. The IMF said, you present a budget and implement these policies, then we'll give you the loan. They came back February 28th, 1991. Yashwant Sinha was to present the budget. And on that day, Rajiv Gandhi withdrew support. So the government collapsed. And Yashwant Sinha could not present the budget, right? And that's why elections were called. It was Rajiv Gandhi's decision not to allow Chandrasekhar to present the budget. Because if Chandrasekhar had presented that budget and locked India into an IMF stabilization program, it would have been difficult then for Rajiv Gandhi to withdraw support.
Yes.
Because here was a man who was dealing with a crisis. So in a sense, Rajiv Gandhi's decision was a preemptive strike. And he assumed that with the elections he would come back to power. When Narsimha Rao became Prime Minister, as I have recorded, first of all, Chandrasekhar was still a little ideological. He was left-of-center politician.
Yes.
Narsimha Rao was not in that sense a left-of-center politician. I mean, he was all old congressmen. He was a kind of a socialist, right? That is the old Congress tradition.
Yes.
But he was a pragmatic fellow. And he, as a foreign minister, if you look at his track record, I mean, he was very pragmatic. So on that day, Naresh Chandra met him as cabinet secretary and gave him the note that had already been prepared as to what government had to do. He looked at that note and said, look, I will require an economist to do this. And he called up I.G. Patel, who had been governor of the Reserve Bank, asked him to come and join as finance minister. And I.G., it's one of those bizarre things in life. You're invited to become finance minister of India. And I.G. Patel said, I've just retired and settled down in Baroda. I don't feel like coming back to Delhi. It's amazing. So he declined the job.
Yeah.
And that's when Mr. Rao picked up Dr. Singh.
But don't we have a similar story when it came to Narsimha Rao? Imagine, is that when he's all packing up?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like when life strikes you at
Yeah.
in the 80s, it's like it's a jackpot.
Exactly.
And he was pragmatic enough not to
Yeah.
say no.
Absolutely.
So coming back, and to a certain extent, I'll not go with Vinay Sethapati when he calls him half lion.
No, absolutely right.
I think
Yeah. No,
he's a
in fact,
complete. He's not half in any sense of the term.
I think that was an unkind cut.
Yes.
I entirely agree with you. And also some specific instances which Vinay discusses. I told him at that time that I disagreed with some of his assumptions about Rao. I think Rao was a decisive man.
Yes.
But he was very responsible. For example, on the whole nuclear issue.
Yes.
He acted in a responsible manner. He didn't want to be irresponsible. But that doesn't mean he was holding back. It was a deliberate decision not to test. And when Vajpayee ji became Prime Minister, he handed him over this thing, the famous remark, कि सामग्री तुम्हारे पास छोड़ रहा हूँ, or something like that.
Yes. Now, coming to my final question, where we have discussed elites who were not a part of the power structure but then became a part of the power structure, and the changing character of the elites and everything since the last 2-3 decades. My final question to you, again, we come back, is there a power elite in India, and who are they and where they come from? Is there a specific area where they come from?
No, I don't think there's any area as such. I mean, fact is that across the country, the democratic process has thrown up a fairly wide cross section. I think what we do have is a concentration of power in certain regions, and their influence at the national level. So, for example, given the regime today,
Yes.
it's a highly North Indian dominated regime. You have two gentlemen who are the most powerful people in the government from one state, and two of the top billionaire businessmen from that state. So there's an excessive concentration of power in, say, Gujarat, for example. Similarly, because of the composition of the parliament, states like UP, Bihar get a bigger voice. Large states generally get a bigger voice. In fact, I oppose the division of Andhra Pradesh on this basis. I had argued in several of my columns that once you break, Andhra Pradesh had 42 MPs in parliament. And one of the reasons someone from Andhra Pradesh became President of India, which is Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan, V.V. Giri, and Sanjeev Reddy, 3 presidents of India from Andhra Pradesh, and 1 Prime Minister, Narsimha Rao, was because of the number of MPs from that state.
Yes.
And once we broke that state, we have reduced Telangana and Andhra Pradesh to Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh and northeastern states that have no real representation at the national level.
Yes.
So which are the important states today? Is Bengal, Maharashtra, apart from UP, Bihar, and Tamil Nadu. And Andhra Pradesh's kind of political clout has gone down. And you can see it in the day-to-day working of politics. There was a time when Chandrababu Naidu was so powerful as the Chief Minister of the United Andhra Pradesh because he could come to Delhi and get what he wanted.
And Rajshekhar Reddy.
And Rajshekhar Reddy in the Congress system, right? But today, nobody in Delhi bothers about Naidu or Revant Reddy. 20 MPs or 19 MPs, This is like Jharkhand Chief Minister or Chhattisgarh Chief Minister. So, which are the regions that matter? Still the big ones, UP, Bihar, Bengal, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu,
Even MP has more, 29.
Yeah, MP, of course. MP.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Baru, for your time and for this very interesting conversation. I'm sure my viewers will also like it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.